This week on the Red Sneaker Writers Podcast.
It's never too late to write your first book.
Welcome to the Red Sneaker Writers Podcast. News, interviews, and writing tips for people who are serious about having a writing career and want some practical knowledge to help them achieve it. Your host is the nationally best-selling author of more than 50 books, William Bernhardt.
Hello, sneakers! Welcome back to the podcast. Hey, I don't know if you've been counting, but this is our 99th podcast. Unless I lost count somewhere, which is completely possible. Anyway, we're coming up on a big round number. The next podcast will be 100. You're celebrating, Jesse. I can see it on the screen already. Wait, save it. We're not quite there yet.
All right, sorry.
We will celebrate, and I will have some special announcements for this 100th episode. So please don't miss it. What do you think, Jesse? How should we celebrate the big 100?
Well, I think one, other than, just having a dance off on screen, I think we should have some of our favorite guests back on.
Oh, there's the thought. That might be a crowded episode, but whatever. Let me also mention to everyone that you've only got a little bit more time left to register for WriterCon and get the sharply reduced early bird price. I mean, you can register probably anytime, but between now and September. But to get the reduced price, you need to move quickly. WriterCon, of course, is our annual writers conference that focuses on helping you in particular, achieve your writing dreams. Sessions will focus on how to be better writers, how to improve your art and craft, giving you what you need, as well as navigating this increasingly complex world of publishing. We're going to be talking more about that later in this episode, whether the traditional world or the self-publishing world, finding agents and editors and publicists and mentors. Our focus is on providing you what you need to succeed, and giving you opportunities to meet people, to make contacts, and, maybe even have a little fun over the weekend. The conference is Labor Day weekend. That's September 2nd to 5th this year. So please check out our website, writercon.com, WRITERCON.com. Jesse, you're a veteran. What's your favorite part of WriterCon?
Well, I really enjoy just hearing from all the different authors and their process for how they write. Personally, doing a live show was fantastic, and I look forward to doing that again, hopefully in the evening this time. And, it really it was a great networking opportunity and a chance just to talk with people, which is something we haven't really gotten to do over the past 3 years or so.
That's right. Broadcasting the podcast, that's fun. Broadcasting the open mic, that might, or the karaoke contest night, that might be even more. Some people might object to that being recorded. I have a hunch. I don't know.
Blackmail materials.
There you go. My special guest today is Julia Brewer Daily, whose first novel, No Names to Be Given, is a terrific novel that has won a host of awards. It's a thrilling story that also addresses a very serious subject. Just to pique your interest, here's a quote from the novel. "A child born to another woman calls me mommy. The magnitude of that tragedy and the depth of that privilege are not lost on me." Intrigued? I can't wait to talk to the author about this wonderful book. But first, the news. I couldn't help but lead with this one, the news of a completely indie author who's getting a big Netflix/Syfy series based upon his self-published work. Some of you may be lamenting the demise of the Van Helsing. Jesse, were you a Van Helsing fan?
I I did not watch the TV show, even though all of the nerdy pop culture websites I check told me to watch it, so I probably will get to it at some point, but I know it was enjoyable, and I do
Yeah.
love I love the Van Helsing character as a fun character to follow around. So,
Right. I actually watched a few eps, but so I don't know. We got sidetracked. There's so much on. Anyway, what we're talking about is the author Johnny B. Truant, who has been doing well for some times, but now his series, which he calls the Fat Vampire book series, Nobody Flame Me. This is his title. I'm just quoting. And it's been picked up for a certain. Predictably, they're going to change the title to Reginald the Vampire, so it doesn't sound as fat shaming, I guess. The premise here is the author wondered, why is it in movies and whatnot vampires are always handsome, hunky, good looking, charismatic guys? Don't any slobs ever get bitten by vampires? And where are they? And
that's a
so
fair question.
he came up with this series, which has a lot of heart. That's basically about one guy who isn't looking like Angel on Buffy or something like that, and trying to navigate the world of vampires. Does this sound like something you're going to add to your playlist, Jesse?
Sometimes there are some really great, like, off-kilter vampire stuff. I can't remember. There was a show, maybe it was on the CW, that involved zombies actually, which was like a little bit off-kilter, and um, I'm all for people playing around with, standard characters like vampires. So, and I find it's funny that uh, Jacob's gonna be playing said Fat Vampire because he used to be much heavier than he currently is now. So that'll be
Oh,
interesting to see.
interesting. What I love most about this, of course, is that it's coming from a completely self-published series. This is not quite the first time that's ever happened, but it's the most prominent deal for an indie author by far. We've talked throughout this podcast, not playing favorites, not dissuading anybody from traditional publishing, but we are living now in a creator economy. We are living in a world where authors are being empowered to a degree that did not exist when I started writing. I'm not sure it's ever existed. I think authors have more choices, more paths, and more opportunities to take charge, and not just of the money, although there is that. That authors are beginning to be compensated more fairly, since they're the ones who are generating the story that make the whole industry run, but also just in terms of control and being able to make the decisions critical for their work. And to me, this deal is one more sign of how much the writing world is changing in a way that I think benefits and empowers writers. Okay, item number 2. And this has to do with Amazon, because, of course, there's always a story about Amazon. But this one is about a revolt mounting against Amazon's policy of allowing readers to return ebooks for full credit, even if they've completely read them. And, Amazon can, of course, tell how many pages you've accessed, whether you've read the first 3 pages of the whole book. But as it stands now, people can return a book anytime after they've bought it, even if they've read it completely, and seem to be doing so in increasing numbers. There apparently been some online posts where people are saying, hey, here's a way to read books and never have to pay for it. And people are doing it more and more and more. One author I know saw triple-digit returns last month. Before it had been, really small, but it's starting to increase dramatically. And so, if you're watching the video, you can see online, Jesse has posted a picture of a petition on change.org where Amazon authors are signing a petition to protest this policy. They've got over 45,000 names on the petition as of this morning, and they are adding more all the time. And you can see why. I mean, Jesse, can you think of any other marketplace or a product that allows people to return something after they have completely used it?
No, and as someone who has used Amazon's return policy to their own benefit many, many times, like
Yes.
this is too far. This is like buying a gallon of milk, drinking that gallon of milk, and then returning empty gallon to grocery store. Like it
Right.
makes no sense. And there's honestly people doing it more is probably going to change Amazon's policy more than this petition because Amazon wants to do what makes them the most money, right?
Mhm.
And if Amazon knows that everybody knows they can buy an ebook and then return it, they're not going to want that. They want their money.
Well, you
So
would think that's what I mean. It makes no sense
no,
if 48 hours to return a book. Okay, I could see that. Or if you've read 5% or less and you just don't like it, okay, I could see that. But this is just crazy and is the exact antithesis of what I was saying a minute ago about how authors are being empowered. This is a loophole that's letting people read authors' work and not give the author anything in compensation. There's a revolt going on in Etsy right now, too. As you probably read, people are pulling down their Etsy sites because Etsy increased the amount of fees that it charges them. And that's probably about the equivalent of this petition that's going on with Amazon. I hope it works. At the end of the
yeah.
day, we go ahead.
I was just saying, I will post a link to this petition in the chat
Great.
in a couple minutes. I can't, I don't have a monitor open to look for it right now, but I will soon. So
Great. I'll put it in the show notes too. I mean, sure, we need Amazon. Amazon sells a lot of books, but Amazon needs authors too. And this flies in the face of that author empowerment I was just regaling a minute ago. Okay, third and final item, and this is really just an update. You remember, I think a couple of podcasts ago when we talked about Brandon Sanderson's off the chart successful Kickstarter campaign in which basically he's allowing people to get access to 4 new novels first, maybe not exclusively, but first by joining his Kickstarter campaign. When it launched, he set a new one-day total, and now after 30 days it is closed. This man has raised $41 million, over $41 million. The campaign has over 181,000 backers. It is the highest funded Kickstarter in Kickstarter history. And this is an author. Now, that's cool. That's just the flip side. That's author empowerment. Uh, I don't know. You're a Sanderson fan. Does this surprise you, Jesse?
I mean, I think it surprised him. Like,
Yeah,
I
really.
knew he was popular. I did not realize, like, I didn't even get a chance to sign up before it closed, but some friends of mine did. And really, all I did was cost myself money going forward because to get these things that he's making is just going to cost me more now. But I don't think anyone realized that one, his fans were this devoted, and two, had this much disposable income.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, you think about it. Okay, so he's got 181,000 backers. That's a big number. If he sold that many books, that would be impressive, although not record shattering or anything like
yeah.
that. But because he had the ingenuity to turn this into a higher dollar Kickstarter campaign, it's $40 million in the bank.
And I mean, he knows what nerds want. Like part of this campaign is like really beautifully made hardcovers that he's only making a
Yeah.
very small amount
Yeah.
of, and like monthly swag bags of stuff. We're
Mhm.
collectors. Like he gets it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's what made it so successful is that he really just gave his audience exactly what they wanted.
Yeah, well, you're talking about science fiction nerds, but as far as I'm concerned, anybody who still reads books in this day and age is a nerd, a blessed nerd, and we love them. And I think you could come up with I mean, my house is filled with fancy books and collectible items. And, no, I'm not going to run out and try and duplicate his success. I don't think it would go quite as well, but still a good example of what a creative mind can do in the creator economy. All kinds of doors are being opened for authors. We just need to take advantage of them more.
If people who are listening or watching are feeling generous and want to help us, now is a good time to plug our Patreon page for this
There,
podcast.
there you
So
go. We don't have ads. We're supported by a Patreon campaign. And if you'd like to, if you got a little money left over after you did Brandon Sanderson, then visit patreon.com/Wilburn. That's WILLBERN. All right. My guest today is Julia Brewer Daily, the author of a debut novel titled No Names to Be Given. Hey, Julia, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Bill. Hello, Jesse.
How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm a devoted fan of you as an instructor, and I count myself as one of the Red Sneaker writers, so I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh, fantastic. I see those red sneakers hovering over your shoulder. That's fantastic.
Yes.
All right. If you've listened to this before, then you know what my first question is going to be. If you could give writers one piece of advice, what would it be?
It's never too late to write your first book.
Yeah, that kind of relates to your story, right? This was,
Exactly.
I think I've read like a retirement project for you. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And it worked out all
I've
right.
started a podcast for authors over 50 to celebrate all of us who wrote our first books after the age of 50.
That's fantastic. What's the podcast called?
Authors over 50.
Well, that's directed to
named.
It's less mysterious than Red Sneaker Writers or what's
Exactly.
that? All right. Well, tell us about No Names to Be Given.
Well, it's beginning in 1966, and it's three young unwed women who meet at a maternity home in New Orleans to relinquish their babies for adoption, and then they return home as if nothing transpired. And 25 years later, they're brought back together by a blackmailer who threatens their secrets all the way to the White House.
Now that sounds intriguing. I see in the chat box, someone's asking for a link to the podcast. I don't know if we can do that, but just go wherever you get podcasts and search for Authors Over 50, and you can find it and subscribe to it in the podcast in Apple or whatever the equivalent is on Androids.
Google,
and you
Spotify.
ought to be able to find it. Yeah, Spotify. And while I'm thinking about it, listeners, feel free to use the chat box to send us questions you'd like to ask Julia. Hey, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, there's a thread of memoir running through it because I'm an adopted child from a maternity home in New Orleans, and it has an adoptee as one of the points of view, and those were pretty much verbatim.
I think we've
40
lost Julia.
years
There
ago.
she is. Okay.
I
You
searched
cut
and
out for a
found.
second, Julia. Can you say that again, please?
Well, it has a memoir thread running through it because I'm an adopted child from a maternity home in New Orleans. And I searched and found my birth mother. And so it has those elements in the book. The episodes from the point of view of one of the adoptees is pretty much verbatim my story as an adoptee.
Well, it sounds like some of the research then started pretty close to home, but you probably had to add on to that, right? What kind of research did you do?
Well, we think that we have memories of earlier years in our childhood and adulthood, but I had forgotten a lot about the 60s, the way people dressed and the songs and the foods and what was and wasn't available then. So I had to do a lot of research on the era. And also that time fell within the baby scoop era, when so many unwed women were giving up their babies for adoption, really forced by society and their families. So it's a real interesting time in our history that young women today and young men who've read the book said, they didn't realize what was going on then.
Well, elaborate on that a little bit because, Gen Z may not know what you're talking about. Why would anybody be forced to give up their child?
Well, society had a lot of rules back then and thought that babies needed a mother and a father in the home, and there weren't single parents at all. People really, truly were shipped away to these places to have their babies and give them up and not let anybody in the community, especially if you lived in small towns, to know about it, because it was just a lot of shame was heaped on women who were unwed and became pregnant then.
And you've already mentioned that you were adopted yourself, but I read on your website that you searched for and actually located your biological parents, right?
I
Tell us
did.
about that. How'd that happen?
Well, in New Orleans, at the time I was searching, there was a Napoleonic law still on the books that said an adopted child can inherit from their natural parents. Well, you can't inherit from somebody you don't know. So I went to the Bureau of Records and I was able to use that loophole to open the closed and sealed records. I don't know if you know, but when you adopt a child, the birth certificates are changed to reflect that the adoptive parents gave birth to them, and the original birth
Mm.
certificate of the birth mother and father are sealed. And most states now have sealed records. There's a lot going on trying to open those to adult adoptees, but there are only about 10 states in the country that have open records after you're an adult.
Hmm. Wow. Um, but you did locate yours, right? And are
I
you
did.
glad you did it? Did it turn out well?
It turned out well for me. Now, when you open up a search like that, you've got to be prepared. You hope
Right.
for the best, but prepare for the worst because somebody
Mm.
might not want to be found if this has been a big family secret all of those years. And then, of course, with all the DNA commercial kits that we have now that people give for gifts, you have to really be careful because so many people around the country are finding out lots of secrets that are coming to light because of those DNA kits. And actually, I received a message from the company where I had sent my DNA, and the subject line was, "Are you my sister?" Well, that'll get your attention.
Mm.
And sure enough, it was one of my birth father's daughters who got in touch with me after the DNA results came in.
Mhm. Wow, that would be a life-shattering event, I would think. But anyway, so you took all of this stuff from your own past, you took this very serious subject, and you've turned it into what sounds like kind of a thriller. I mean, as you said, it reaches all the way to the White House. Why did you choose that kind of story?
Well, I wanted to put a little distance between me and these family members who were still keeping secrets. And I
Mm.
didn't want to expose families' secrets that they didn't want exposed. So I took it into fiction. I could have done memoir, and there are a lot of birth mothers and adoptees who are writing memoirs now about their experiences. But I wanted a little distance between my true story and what really was happening with my families.
And you quickened the pace a little bit, I would imagine, too, by adding some suspense elements to this story.
Bill, I've read your books and I've gotten really hooked on thrillers. I ride my
Ah,
bike every day and listen to audiobooks is how I have time to read. And I
fantastic.
get quicker and quicker in my pace. The scarier or the more suspenseful the novel is. So that keeps me pedaling.
Oh, I need to get a bicycle, clearly. I mean, I do walk my cat every day, but that doesn't really, I couldn't, it'd take a long time to get through an audiobook that way. Hey, I see a question coming in the chat box from one of our listeners who's asking, at what age did you find out you were adopted, Julia?
I don't ever remember not knowing that I was adopted. My adoptive mother said they started reading books to me when I was a child and telling me that I was a chosen child. That's what we call
Hmm,
adoptees.
nice.
They really had to go to a lot of work to get me, and I kind of lorded that over my siblings because we had the old adoption syndrome in my family. My parents were told they would never be able to have children, and they adopted me. And 19 months later, my brother was born, and
Ah,
10 years later, my sister. So I would tell them that, mother and daddy had to work really hard to get me, but you two were accidents. So, siblings will do anything they have to or use anything to gig the other.
That's great. Someone else listening on Facebook is asking, Julia, who are your favorite authors?
Well, I have a lot of Mississippi favorites, of course, the literary champions in Mississippi, Eudora Welty and all of those. But I do love the thrillers now. And Julie Clark wrote a wonderful book called The Last Flight. I love her premise in that book. I wish I had thought of it.
That's
Two women meet at an airport and exchange tickets because they both want to disappear. And I just thought, how wonderful is that?
uh-huh.
So I've been reading her work lately.
Oh, that sounds terrific. You remind me of something I noticed in your book. It's written from multiple viewpoints, which is not uncommon in thrillers, but in your case, you've got specifically 3 women who are going to interact throughout the book, but you tell different chapters from each of them's viewpoint. How did you, I don't know, stumble across or decide upon this somewhat atypical approach to writing the story?
Well, I wanted to show back in that day that women came from all walks of life. They were not just lower income bracket people. There were especially the upper income people who found themselves in this predicament, went to this maternity home. So I formed each character totally from different backgrounds and different walks of life so that we could hear the story, in their perspective.
Cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about writing process, because I know a lot of people listening to this are writing or thinking about writing or have written quite a bit. What's your process like? Do you write every day, or how do you go about it?
I was writing every day until the marketing began for this book, and that will
Right.
take you out of your seat or
Mhm.
put you onto different sites than your writing routines. I'm a hybrid, I think, between the plotter and the pantser. I'd like to get it all down on paper and then start my outlines to see where my holes are. But I don't know if you've ever taken the NaNoWriMo challenge,
Mm.
but I don't know if our listeners know about it, but hundreds of thousands of people take this challenge in November. It's called National Novel Writing Month. And you take this challenge to write 50,000 words in the month of November. Well, that's 1,667 words a day. And that is pretty difficult.
Mhm.
But I stopped being the English major and correcting myself and worrying about every chapter every day that I had to go back and edit. And I just sat down and didn't worry about punctuation or anything and just spilled the words onto the paper. And that at least gave me something to edit by the end of
Mhm.
November.
Okay, so, but even if you have 50,000 words, that's not a book, probably. That's not a novel. And at best, it's the first draft, and nobody's going to publish their first draft. So it's not really that you're writing a novel in a month. It's just that you're getting a whole lot of words down on paper, right?
Yes. It kept me very dedicated and committed because I'm a checklist person. And if I
Mhm.
say I'm going to do something, I do it and follow through. So at
Oh,
least I got
good.
those words on paper.
Well, that's why I put those contracts in the back of the book, right? Or you've been to a retreat. That's why I try and get people to sign contracts. For some, anyway, that works. If you put it down on paper, then by gosh, you will stick to your commitment of writing so many pages or writing every day or whatever it's going to take to get your book done.
Yes,
And it sounds worked for you, right? But
it did.
I didn't really understand what you were saying about somewhere being between a plotter and a pantser. I mean, come on, pick. Which is it? If you're writing an outline, it sounds a lot like you're a plotter.
Well, I'm a pantser.
The suspense.
Can you say that again? You blipped out on us again, Julia.
I'm a plotter because it's so much more efficient. And
Mhm.
I want to, be able to follow through on the outline and stay close to the plot line instead of going off in different tangents. But during NaNoWriMo, I became a hybrid or a pantser just to get the words on the page.
I see in the chat box one of our friends watching this on YouTube is saying that being dyslexic herself, she loves that you, as an English teacher, admitted that. I assume referring to, trying to get the words done on time so that you can actually have a book someday. Did you have any tricks or strategies for bringing your characters to life? I mean, in your book in specific, you've got 3 female characters, and if they don't come across, the book wouldn't work. So how did you go about building those characters?
I've been told that that's my strength is characterization. And I think it's because I write like I can see them on the big screen. I can see what they're wearing. I can see what they're eating. I can see, their surroundings. And it probably helped in this book because I was writing about the South and about cities that I know very well, New Orleans, Jackson, Mississippi, Birmingham. I know all of those cities well, so I could picture those and place those women there. And I grew up knowing women like this in my book. So that became easier for me. And I think other people can see this book on a big screen as well because a media agent in Hollywood is shopping it around to studios, and I think they like that those years. We call it historical fiction now, even though some of us grew up in those times, but the 60s are real special to everybody.
That's how I feel when a movie comes on Turner Classic Movies, and I think, hey, I remember taking a girl to see that in high school.
Exactly.
It doesn't seem so classic.
No.
Oh, well. Did you do anything to, so you've got a great idea, great subject, but how do you keep readers engaged in the story? Personal to you, but how do you draw in readers?
Well, I think that's why I put the thriller aspect to it because it kept it moving. I kept momentum going in the novel, and I think those cliffhangers that we can put at the end of chapters. I've been told that that kept people up at night and flipping through the chapters with those cliffhangers.
It's supposed to keep them up all night because they can't put it down. But yeah, that's pretty good too. I'm just teasing. So you got a serious subject, obviously, but beyond that, are there any particular themes you're exploring with this story? What were you getting at, do you think, when you started this?
Well, I hope this book will draw attention to adoption, to the hundreds of thousands of children who are in the foster care system who desire a home so much. This is a hot button topic now, adoption, with same-sex adoptive parents, with adopting out of the culture, with international versus national adoptions, and of course the flip side of all of that is Roe versus Wade and abortion. So there are a lot of hot button topics that this novel brings up, and I think that's why it's been so popular with book clubs. And one good thing that came out of the pandemic is that we get to Zoom all over the country and get to discuss with book clubs in their living rooms. And that's been a big discussion topic for this book.
That is sweet. A nice aspect to reach out to people in that way. You mentioned book marketing a while back, and I know you've been busy. So give our listeners some tips. What do you think works and what doesn't?
Well, I've written a lot of articles for online magazines. I think that calls attention to your book. I've done a lot of blog tours. I had a Chirp deal, that's for ebooks.
Right.
And that sold thousands of ebooks.
Really? Wow.
Yes. And I've been trying to get one of those BookBub deals, Bill, and I know you've become an expert at that, so I would like some tips on that.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but the starting point is, get at least 50 reviews on your Amazon page and keep it well above 4.0, because otherwise I don't think you're even in the running. And then price it low for the BookBub. And of course, if it's the first book in a series, that's going to have some more appeal too. But I mean, I shouldn't say, but my sense is that this is not going to have a sequel. Am I right about that?
No, I've written the second book, but it's about ranches in Texas. We live in Texas now, and I've become enamored with these large ranches out here. So the second book is going to be about a female heiress to the largest ranch in Texas who stumbles upon an ancient people living on her property.
When do we get to see that?
August, I hope, late August.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we'll watch for that. Well, that's just a little bit before WriterCon. I think you should come up from Texas. I mean, where in Texas are you?
We're in Fredericksburg. It's between San Antonio and Austin.
Oh, well, I'm going to guess that's about 7 or 8 hours, but still, pleasant drive. And we would love to have you up. If not this year, then some other time. Hey, the people in the chat box are saying your next book sounds amazing. So
good.
That's a good sign. It's a terrific book, and I highly recommend it to anybody listening to it, and can't wait to read the next one. Julia, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Bill.
Okay, bye-bye. Hey, everybody. Like I said, annual writers conference, WriterCon. We have authors, agents, editors, book marketers, author assistants, over 70 sessions, over 50 speakers, many chances for you to meet people, network, make the connections, knowledge you need to build your writing career. And of course, as I mentioned, the early bird price is still available, but not for much longer. So if you're interested, please check out that website, writercon.com. If you're writing or aspiring to write, please think about joining our Facebook group, Red Sneaker Writers, so you can see what we're chatting about and get the news updates on a daily basis. And if you're enjoying this podcast, just like Julia was saying about hers, please go subscribe to the Red Sneaker Writers podcast. Then rate it or review it, or both, wherever it is you get podcasts. It does make it easier for new listeners to discover us. All right? Until next time, sneakers, keep writing. And remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. See you next time.